Hey guys, this is Truth is Scarier Than Fiction. Today I'm doing my first Reddit scary story narration. All these stories are from the Reddit subforum. There is mature content in this, recommended 14 and up. Story number 1. So before I start this post, I would like to mention that everything said by me or someone else in the story is translated from my language to English, so it might sound a bit weird. I was 11, on my way back home from a friend. It was around 9 p.m. It's winter, so it was really dark outside. And I'm walking next to a synagogue that's 1,600 feet, or 500 meters, from anything. And little, easily scared me is frantically looking at every direction, scared that something might be stalking me or might jump at me. Suddenly, I hear a car door opening and a voice shouting, "Hey kid, come here for a moment." I manage to pick up that he's a foreigner because of his accent, which makes it even scarier. I'm scared, bleep, trying to walk it out and act like I didn't hear him. He shouts again, "Little kiddo, I just need some help with my car, trust me." Now I'm scared, I don't want to answer him. I don't know what to do, he's an older guy. He could easily outrun me. Should I shout? No, I don't even know what his intentions are, and don't want to alarm him. That might make him do something. Now I'm looking at this guy from over my shoulder, he's walking toward me. "Oh no, please no," I shout. "I just want to go home. My parents are waiting for me." Getting closer. About 10 meters from me, he says, "Oh then, let me get you a ride home." "Let's go in my car." "No thank you, it's okay, my house is literally 2 minutes from here." He lifts his arm as to put his arm on my shoulder. I hold back my tears. I try to walk back. He catches my shoulder and smiles. Suddenly I hear a voice calling, "Hey Ron! Ron! Come here!" That voice is my uncle's, and I feel relieved. The guy just starts running to his car, starts it, and just speeds off. I burst into tears. My uncle comes running. I tell him what happened. He takes me home, and while talking to the cops on the phone, they tell him that they didn't find him. So to the guy who wanted 11-year-old me to come in his car for whatever reason, let's not meet. Number 2. I was a student at UC Berkeley and lived close to campus and frat houses. Since summer school started, I made it a habit to study at my friend's co-op late at night and walk back home at late hours. This incident happened a few months ago. I'm a pretty tall guy in my late 20s, so I was a little shocked that this happened to me. I was walking back home at around 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday from my friend's co-op. Nothing out of the ordinary. I usually have my laptop on me, but for some unknown reason on this particular night, the thought of getting mugged crossed my mind with more intensity than usual, so I was a little more on edge. I had just left my friend's place. It was a residential area with a bunch of frat houses on both sides of the street. I think students call this the frat row. I was about to cross the street when this red car sped down the street my way. I waited for the car to pass, but it was perhaps their speeding that rubbed me the wrong way, so stupid me decided to flip him off. To my surprise, this car screeched to a halt and let me pass. I was a little embarrassed at my gesture, so I hustled to the other side of the street. That's when I noticed 2 guys walking about a half block behind me in my direction. I kept walking, but I looked behind me once because I'm a little on edge. I noticed 3 more guys on the other side of the street. At this point, to ease my paranoid mind, instead of continuing down my usual path down Frat Row, I make a right turn into a smaller residential street with frat houses on both sides of the street. I look behind me again and notice all 5 guys follow me to the smaller street. This raises red flags, but I try to keep my cool because, hey, it could just be a coincidence that they made the same turn, right? I begin to take larger steps to increase the gap between the 5 guys and myself. The frequency of looking back increases to once every 5 seconds. I feel them getting closer. This is when I can finally make out their appearance as one of the dudes. He's wearing a gray sweatshirt with hoodie on and red shorts. He looks like a college candidate, but I'm still a little uneasy. As soon as I arrive at the intersection at the bottom of my block, I turn left and begin running like hell. I don't want to continue playing the paranoia game, so I reasoned that it wouldn't be the weirdest thing in the world if I decided to run now. Seconds after my initial dash, I hear running footsteps not far behind me. I'm thinking, holy hell, this is really happening. And I don't think much else, since I'm in a fight or flight mode. And the most important thing in the world right now is to just continue running. The idea of screaming for help doesn't even cross my mind. I run to the next intersection without ever turning back to look behind me, and instead of turning right back to run back home, I turn left into more frat houses because I'm already on that side of the street and I just want to disappear from my followers' field of vision. I'm running up this new residential street and I commit what is quite possibly an incredibly stupid mistake. Instead of continuing my run up the street, I approach an apartment with doorsteps and a porch with an illuminating light. The porch had wall-like structures on the siding that made it for a decent hiding place, so I figured that hiding as soon as I turned the corner would be a good strategy. However, there were no neighbors in sight and the apartment's front doors were locked, so I felt utterly cornered. I was ready to face my followers and forfeit to them all of my bleep. I stood there, hiding behind the wall-like structure on top of the doorsteps, anticipating the next few seconds. All I heard was a distant but loud boom from the intersection I was just at, then more silence. That was probably one of my followers trying to rattle my cage. At this point, I was crouching and texting my friend whose place I just left, telling him I was being chased. He calls me and tells me to call the cops, and they didn't exactly put me on ease. In my state of panic, I found it difficult to answer questions, like where the chase began. Eventually, I saw a guy and a girl walking by the intersection, so I told the cops I was okay. I emerged from my hiding spot, and with constant looks over my shoulder and 3 blocks later, I was back home safe. Number 3. This took place about 10 years ago to 2 of my cousins, Kate and Emma. Kate and Emma are sisters, Kate being the oldest. Kate was around 10 to 12, and Emma was about 6 years younger. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you some specifics about my house so you can understand it better. The house is built on the slope of a small hill. The front door sits at the top of the hill, and there's a curved staircase that leads up the hill to the front door. The entire first floor sits on the top of the hill also. In the kitchen on the first floor is a sliding door that leads out to a large deck on the side of the house. The deck has 2 sets of staircases, one that leads to the front and one that leads to the back. The house also has a basement. There's a door in the basement that leads to the garage. The garage leads out to the driveway, which is next to the beginning of the staircase that leads to the front door. That may seem complicated, but hopefully it all makes sense. So on to the story. Kate and Emma were home alone watching TV. It was sometime in the afternoon. Now they lived in a fairly small town, safe neighborhood, so it was pretty normal to leave younger kids alone. While watching TV, their doorbell rang. They walked out onto the porch, they had an indoor porch, and looked out the window to see a middle-aged man just standing there. Nothing in his hands, dressed pretty casual, nothing really out of the ordinary. Kate knew never to open the door to strangers, so she walked away, hoping he would just leave and think no one was home. A few minutes had passed and the guy begins banging on the door and doesn't stop. Kate is now a little freaked out because clearly this guy is not going to leave. Kate grabs a home phone and calls her dad and tells him about the guy. He says to grab Emma and go out the sliding door, down the deck and run to the neighbor's yard. So still on the phone with her dad, Kate grabs Emma and walks into the kitchen. She hadn't noticed that the banging had stopped until she saw the man was now standing on their deck right at the sliding door. Now in full panic, Kate tells her dad and he says to run down into the basement and let Jake off his chain. Jake was their huge dog. Hopefully, they thought Jake would scare away the guy. Kate ran down into the basement and into the garage. Jake's cage was in the garage, and they would often leave the garage door open just enough so Kate could walk under it and move around outside while still attached to his chain. While Kate and Emma get into the garage, the guy was standing there right outside the garage petting Jake, clearly now scared of him. Now Kate and Emma are basically in tears, not sure what the guy wants. Their dad says to quickly run back down the sliding door, down on the deck and to the neighbors. Practically dragging Emma by the arms, Kate runs up the stairs and out the kitchen onto the deck. The guy's now walking up by the first set of steps to the deck, shouting angrily at them. They scream and run down the other set of stairs and sprint across the grass. Since this is the country, the houses have a decent amount of yard in between each. While running on this stretch of grass, the guy is chasing after them, screaming for them to come back. They finally made it to the neighbors and burst through the door without even knocking. Thankfully, they were home and called the police. The dad arrived shortly before the police do and began questioning the guy. Apparently, all he needed was to get some gas. I don't remember exactly what happened after that, or what happened to the guy, but I can ask my cousins later and update you guys. Anyway, this story comes up a lot in my family, and we all agree that his true intentions were clearly not to get little gas from two little girls clearly terrified out of their mind. Number 4. This happened when I was really young. I was only, 8 or 9 at the time? Now there's a little bit of backstory. Up until middle school, I was totally a mama's boy. I was constantly at my grandma's. My grandparents really weren't that old at that time. They liked to get out and travel. So I would go over there and stay all the time. I was over at my grandparents more than my own parents. My grandma babied me. She was always the motherly type and had a new grandchild she practically adopted and raised each time the last child left her care. So I'd never gotten any talks about the real world, and I was generally a naive child. It started when my grandpa just wanted to go camping. My grandpa was totally for it. This would have been the first time they could take me, and that I would actually really remember, and they weren't quite too old yet. They could still sleep on the ground without much trouble. They got my aunt and uncle to come with them. My parents couldn't come, my dad had work, and my mom didn't want to come. We went down to a relatively close campsite, maybe 20 minutes from where my grandparents lived. It was a popular place. They had RV hookup places and everything. The river just over the side of the campground. They let me generally wander as they got everything ready, set up the tent, got the cooler out of the truck, and made the campsite nice for a weekend stay. It must have rained there not too long before, because I was drawn to some large puddles near the end of the site, right next to the road. I wasn't a very messy child, but I wanted to be, so I would crouch down right next to the edge puddle and toss little pebbles into it, watching the ripples. Growing bored pretty quickly, I looked around my surroundings and noticed a man. Reflecting back, he was probably between 23 and 27, walking toward me. He must have noticed me watching him, because he smiled and waved, waiting until he was within 10 feet to actually speak up and address me. I don't remember the exacts anymore. Like I said, I was no older than 9. But he said hello. I think he may have offered a name. The man greeted me with a rather friendly smile, and he had asked me what I was up to. I'm playing. Don't you have any toys? He obviously noted the lack of toys. I told him that I did, but they're in the car and I was only allowed to bring 2. He made a face, saying that it was no fun, and that he had a lot of toys. And he asked if I liked dolls. I had said that I do like dolls. My grandma gets me a lot of them. He had this sort of conspiracy smile and asked me if I would like to go see his dolls. He had a lot of them at his house, a whole room of them even. At the time, all I could think about was this image of a man playing with all these baby dolls. In fact, I was picturing a room just like my grandma's baby doll collection room, where the walls were lined with dolls and there was even a bed filled with a bunch of the little monsters. No, you don't. You're an adult. Adults don't play with toys. That giggly tone of voice kids get when they find something funny evident. He had smiled back, making some gestures with his hands. Yes, I do. I like to play with dolls, and I have a bunch I can show you. We can play together. I'd only ever been to my grandparents' house and my parents' house by that time. Not a cousins, nor a school friend, so I had no intentions of going with this friendly-looking stranger. But I was happy enough to talk to him. No, you don't. You're lying. He grinned back at me, getting maybe a step closer. I'm not. I can show you. The thought just tickled me to death, and even the fact that he wanted to play with a little kid like me I thought was funny. You're a liar. Why would adults want to play with dolls? He came off with some garbage that adults like to play too, and then he told me that he could show me. This is when my aunt called my name, telling me to get over there right now, asking what the guy was wanting. I, of course, told her I wanted to show me his dolls. The guy must not have been scared off, because I clearly remember my aunt and grandmother sitting me down as my grandpa and uncle went over to talk to him. This was the first time I've ever been given that don't talk to strangers talk. Never saw the guy again. I don't know if my parents were even told. We only stayed 3 days at the campsite after that. None of the adults involved ever mentioned it again, and I've never asked. I just find it interesting to think back on how stupidly close I got to be kidnapped. Sorry for the error, guys. It was 4 scary chase stories. If you like this narration, be sure to check out some of my other narrations I'll be uploading soon. See ya.